The notification sound from Cassandra's phone cut through the midnight silence like a knife through butter. I'd been lying there for 2 hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me. She'd been exhausted from her wellness retreat planning sessions with Lila, but apparently not too tired to keep her phone buzzing all evening. I'm Eliot Roman, Eli to most folks here in Millbrook, Maine, 38 years old, IT technician for the county, and apparently the biggest fool in town. At least, that's what I was thinking as I watched my wife of 7 years reach for her phone with the practiced stealth of someone who'd done this before. The blue glow illuminated her face as she read whatever message had come through. I saw her expression change. A little smile, the kind she used to give me when we first started dating. My stomach twisted. "Everything okay?" I whispered. She jumped like I'd fired a gun. "Just Lila, about tomorrow's planning session." "At midnight?" You know how she is. Night owl. Cassandra set the phone face down and rolled away from me. "Go back to sleep, Eli." But I couldn't sleep. Something had been eating at me for weeks now. The late nights, the sudden interest in personal growth and finding herself, the way she'd started dressing differently, buying expensive clothes we couldn't afford, and now this midnight texting. 20 minutes later, when her breathing had settled into the deep rhythm of actual sleep, I slipped out of bed. Her phone was still on the nightstand, face down like a guilty secret. I knew her passcode, our anniversary date. She'd never bothered to change it because she trusted me. What I saw made my world tilt sideways. The message wasn't from Lila. It was from someone named D in her contacts. And it wasn't the first message in their conversation thread. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The usual place?" D. I scrolled up. Days of messages. Weeks. "Miss you already." That was incredible. When can we be together for real? Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. And then the one that made me see red, I'm using our vacation fund to help you with the deposit on the new place. Oh, Eli won't even notice. He never pays attention to the finances anyway. Our vacation fund, the money we'd been saving for 3 years to finally take that trip to Ireland she'd always talked about. The account I'd been religiously contributing to every paycheck while she managed the household expenses. I grabbed my laptop from the kitchen table and logged into our bank account. The vacation savings account showed a balance of $847. Last time I'd checked, 2 weeks ago, it had been over $8,000. My hands were shaking as I transferred the remaining money to my personal checking account, the one Cassandra didn't have access to. Then I did something I'd never done in 7 years of marriage. I removed her access to the joint account entirely. The clock on the kitchen wall read 1:47 a.m. I had maybe 5 hours before she woke up. 5 hours to figure out what the heck I was going to do with the rest of my life. I made coffee and sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the computers and electronics I fixed as a side business. The familiar smell of solder and machine oil usually calmed me, but tonight everything felt different. Tonight, I felt like a stranger in my own life. By the time I heard Cassandra moving around upstairs, I'd made several decisions. I'd booked a one-way ticket to Dublin, leaving that afternoon. I'd called in sick to work for the rest of the week, and I'd moved both her laptop and phone to my locked workshop. "Eli," she called from the kitchen, "have you seen my phone?" I walked back into the house, carrying my coffee mug and my travel bag. She was standing by the counter in her robe, hair messy, looking genuinely confused. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart." "My phone was on the nightstand. Did you move it?" "I did." I set my mug down and looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she become a stranger? "It's in my workshop, along with your laptop." Her confusion shifted to irritation. "Why would you do that? I need my phone. I have meetings today." "With Lila or with Dee?" The color drained from her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, a gesture I recognized. Cassandra in defense mode. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." I pulled out my phone and read from the screenshots I'd taken. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The usual place. Miss you already. That was incredible." I looked up at her. "Should I keep going?" She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried a different approach. "Eli, you're misunderstanding." "Am I misunderstanding the $7,200 you took from our vacation fund too?" That stopped her cold. Her face went through several expressions before settling on something I'd never seen before. Calculation. "You went through my phone. You violated my privacy." "You stole from our joint account. You violated our marriage." I didn't steal anything. It's my money, too. Was, past tense. I showed her my phone screen with the bank transfer confirmation. I moved the rest to my personal account, and I removed your access. Now she looked genuinely shocked. You can't do that. I just did. I also booked a flight to Dublin, leaving this afternoon. Eli, wait, let's talk about this. You're overreacting. Am I? To my wife having an affair and stealing money to fund her boyfriend's new apartment? That seems like exactly the right amount of reaction to me. She tried tears next. They looked real enough, but I'd seen her cry over commercials and wilted houseplants. Cassandra had always been good at crying. It's not what you think. Derek and I. We're just friends. He needed help with a deposit, and I... Derek. The name clicked. Derek Lawton, the real estate guy from the Rookery. I laughed, but it didn't sound pleasant even to me. The same Derek who tried to sell us that overpriced house last year. The one who kept staring at your chest during the walkthrough. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Cassandra? Explain to me how that was incredible is just friendship. She straightened up, and suddenly the tears were gone. Fine. Yes, Derek and I have gotten close. But our marriage has been stagnant for years, Eli. We never talk anymore. We never do anything. You spend all your time in that garage or at work. So you decided to do Derek instead. Her face flushed. That's crude, but accurate. We stared at each other across the kitchen. 7 years of marriage, reduced to this moment. Her in her bathrobe, caught and cornered. Me with a suitcase and a one-way ticket, finally seeing clearly. If you leave, she said quietly, I'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned me. I'll tell them you were controlling and paranoid. I'll ruin your reputation in this town. I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. Try me, Cassandra. I'm just getting started. The Rookery hadn't changed in the 15 years I'd been drinking there. Same scarred wooden bar, same neon beer signs, same smell of cigarettes that had soaked into the walls back when smoking indoors was still legal. It was 3 p.m, and the place was nearly empty except for Jules behind the bar and a couple of regulars nursing their daily regrets. I'd canceled the Dublin flight. Sitting in the airport parking lot, I'd realized running away would just give Cassandra exactly what she wanted, a clear field to spin whatever story she chose. Instead, I'd driven straight to the one place in Millbrook where information flowed like cheap whiskey. Eli Roman, Jules said, looking up from the glass she was polishing. Little early for you, isn't it? Jules Morrison had been tending bar at the Rookery for 20 years. She was somewhere in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that missed nothing. If there was gossip in Millbrook, it eventually found its way to Jules. Special occasion, I said, settling onto a bar stool. Whiskey, the good stuff. She raised an eyebrow but poured without comment. Rough day? Rough marriage. I took a sip and felt the burn all the way down. Tell me, Jules, what do you know about Derek Lawton? Her expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Derek Lawton, real estate, thinks he's God's gift to married women. She set down her polishing rag. Why? He's been getting friendly with Cassandra. Ah, Jules nodded slowly. That explains some things. Such as? He's been in here the last few weeks, buying drinks for anyone who'll listen to him brag about his latest conquest. Married woman, he said. Classy. Said she was wasted on her husband. Jules met my eyes. I wondered who the poor bastard was. I finished my whiskey and gestured for another. Now you know? What are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? What was Eli Roman, county IT guy and part-time electronics repairman, going to do about Derek Lawton, successful real estate agent and town golden boy? I'm going to make him regret it. Jules smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Need any help? 2 hours later, I was back home with a plan and a bag of supplies from the grocery store. Cassandra's car was gone, probably at Derek's place, now that she didn't have to hide it anymore. She'd left me 3 voicemails and a dozen text messages, alternating between apologies and threats. I ignored them all and got to work. First, I uploaded screenshots of her text conversation to a shared photo album that included most of our mutual friends. I didn't add any commentary, the messages spoke for themselves. Then I posted a simple status update on social media. Sometimes you think you know someone, thanks to everyone who's reached out with support during this difficult time. I didn't mention Cassandra by name. I didn't have to. In a town like Millbrook, people would connect the dots within hours. Next, I paid a visit to Derek's BMW. He'd parked it behind the Rookery, probably thinking he was being discreet. The car was unlocked. Typical Derek arrogance. I slipped 2 raw shrimp into the heating vents and smeared petroleum jelly under all the door handles. Then I called the town parking authority and reported the car as abandoned in a no parking zone. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing constantly. Friends, family, co-workers, all wanting to know if the rumors were true. I answered a few calls, played the hurt but dignified husband, and let them draw their own conclusions. Cassandra finally came home at 8 o'clock, her face flushed with anger. "What did you do?" she demanded before she was even through the door. "About what?" "You know what? Everyone's calling me. Lila says there are pictures of my private messages online." "Huh? That's weird." "I was sitting at the kitchen table eating leftover pizza and reading a book. Maybe Derek posted them. You know how men like to brag about their conquests." "Derek didn't—" She stopped herself. "You posted them? I know you did." "Can you prove it?" Her phone buzzed. She looked at it and her face went even redder. "Now Derek's car has been towed and he's covered in some kind of grease. He thinks you did something to it." "Me? I've been here all evening. Ask the neighbors." Which was technically true. I'd been home for 3 hours. "Eli, this has to stop. We can work this out. We can go to counseling." "No, we can't." I closed my book and looked at her. "You made your choice, Cassandra. You chose Derek and his new apartment over our marriage and our future. Now you get to live with the consequences." "I'll call the police. I'll tell them you're harassing us." "Go ahead. Tell them your husband found out about your affair and got upset. See how much sympathy you get." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to figure out her next move. Cassandra had always been a planner, always thinking 2 steps ahead, but she'd never planned for this version of me. "You're not the man I married," she said finally. "No," I agreed, "I'm not. The man you married was a pushover who would have taken you back after a few tears and promises. But that man died when he read those text messages. You're dealing with someone new now." She turned and walked upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard her on the phone, voice low and urgent. Probably calling Derek or Lila or both. I didn't care. Let her plan. Let her scheme. I was just getting warmed up. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Derek's threatening to come over there and settle this man-to-man. Thought you should know. Jay." I smiled and typed back, "Thanks. Tell him I'll be in my garage if he wants to chat." Then I went to my workshop and started preparing for visitors. The Millbrook Fall Festival had been a town tradition for 30 years. Every October, the town square filled with craft booths, food trucks, and families enjoying the last warm weekend before winter set in. It was the kind of wholesome community event where everyone showed up, everyone saw everyone else, and gossip spread faster than spilled cider. Perfect for what I had planned. I'd spent the morning setting up my booth. Eli's electronics repair, fixing what's broken. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been participating in the festival for 5 years, usually with Cassandra helping me hand out business cards and charm potential customers. This year, I was flying solo. "Eli!" My Uncle Mick appeared at my booth around noon, carrying a funnel cake and wearing his usual weekend uniform of flannel shirt and work boots. Mick had been a cop for 30 years before retiring, and he still carried himself like one, straight-backed and alert. "Heard you've been having some excitement." News travels fast. Faster when Derek Lawton's been driving around town in a car that smells like a fish market, telling anyone who'll listen that you sabotaged his vehicle. I arranged some old computer parts on my display table. "That's a serious accusation. Hope he has proof." Mick chuckled. "Of course, Derek's also been bragging about his married girlfriend for weeks, so his credibility's taken a hit." He leaned against my table. "You need any help with anything?" "Maybe. Depends on how the day goes." "Well, if you need an old cop's perspective on anything, you know where to find me." The festival crowd was picking up when I spotted them. Cassandra and Derek, walking hand in hand through the craft booths like they were any other couple. She was wearing a new dress, probably bought with my vacation money, and he was in his usual uniform of expensive casual wear that screamed, "I sell overpriced houses to idiots." They were putting on quite a show, laughing, sharing a caramel apple, acting like they didn't have a care in the world, like they weren't the talk of the entire town. I waited until they were near the center of the square, surrounded by the biggest crowd, before making my move. "Derek," I called out, loud enough to turn heads. "How's that car running for you?" He stopped walking and turned toward me, his face already flushing. "Roman." "I heard you've been having some mechanical problems. Smell issues?" A few people nearby started paying attention. Derek glanced around nervously, then tried to project confidence. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because Jules at the Rookery mentioned you've been complaining about some kind of fish odor in October. That's weird, right?" More people were gathering now. Nothing drew a crowd like the promise of public drama. "You know exactly what happened to my car," Derek said, stepping closer. "And you're going to pay for the damage." "What damage? I haven't touched your car." I spread my hands innocently. "Though I have to ask, is it safe to be driving around in a vehicle that smells like rotting seafood? Seems like that might be a health hazard." Someone in the crowd laughed. Derek's face went from red to purple. "You think you're clever," he said, "but everyone knows what you did, just like everyone knows why your wife left you." "Left me?" I looked around at the growing circle of spectators. "Cassandra, did you leave me? Because you were in my house this morning, going through my things." Cassandra had been trying to make herself invisible, but now all eyes were on her. "Eli, please. Not here." "Why not here? This is our community. These are our friends and neighbors. Don't they deserve to know the truth about what's been happening?" "The truth," Derek said, "is that your wife found someone who actually appreciates her." "With my money," I said cheerfully. "Don't forget that part. He appreciates her with the $7,200 she took from our vacation fund." The crowd murmured. In a town like Millbrook, everyone understood the significance of a vacation fund. These were working people who saved for months or years for their family trips. "That's between us," Cassandra hissed. "Is it? Because Derek seems to think it's his business too. After all, he's the one living in the apartment my vacation money paid for." Derek took another step toward me. He was bigger than me, probably outweighed me by 40 pounds, and he was clearly losing his temper. "You want to settle this right now?" "Settle what? The fact that you've been bragging all over town about sleeping with my wife, or the fact that you needed her to steal money from her husband to afford your new place?" "I didn't steal anything," Cassandra said, but her voice was weak. "Really? Because taking money from a joint account without your spouse's knowledge or consent to give to your lover, what would you call that?" Derek lunged forward, but I was ready for him. I stepped aside and accidentally knocked over my cup of apple cider, splashing it all over his expensive shirt. "Oh, sorry about that," I said as Derek stood there dripping. Good thing it wasn't hot coffee. The crowd was openly laughing now. Derek looked around at all the faces, neighbors, potential clients, people whose respect he needed for his business, and realized he just made a fool of himself in front of half the town. "This isn't over," he said. "You're right," I agreed. "It's just getting started." Derek grabbed Cassandra's hand and pushed through the crowd, leaving behind a buzz of conversation that would fuel Millbrook's gossip mill for weeks. I spent the rest of the afternoon at my booth, fixing people's electronics and listening to them tell me how sorry they were about my situation. By closing time, I'd gotten more business cards handed out than in the previous 2 years combined. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people see the truth. The anonymous tip came through Jules 2 days after the festival. I was back at the Rookery, nursing a beer and listening to the locals dissect the weekend's drama when she slid a folded napkin across the bar. "From a friend," she said quietly. The message was written in careful block letters. "D and C planning something, overheard at coffee shop. Something about theft charges and getting you arrested. Be careful." I wasn't surprised. Cornered animals always bite back, and I definitely cornered them. Derek's reputation had taken a beating after the festival incident, and Cassandra was facing social exile from her friend group. They needed to change the narrative, and fast. "Thanks," I told Jules, pocketing the napkin. "Any idea who the friend is?" "Someone who thinks you're getting a raw deal," she said. "That's all you need to know." I finished my beer and headed home to do some research. If they wanted to play legal games, I needed to understand the rules. 3 hours later, I had my answer. Cassandra worked as a social media manager for a local marketing firm, handling their client accounts and petty cash expenditures. If she'd been skimming from that fund the same way she'd skimmed from our vacation account, she was in serious trouble. I called my cousin Brett, who worked in the same office building as Cassandra's firm. Brett was 25, earnest, and completely oblivious to office politics, which made him perfect for what I needed. "Hey Brett, it's Eli. Quick question about your building. Do you guys have security cameras in the parking garage?" "Yeah, everywhere. Why?" Just curious. Cassandra thinks someone scratched her car last week." "Oh, that sucks. You should talk to building security. They keep footage for like 30 days. "Good to know. Thanks." Brett was also Cassandra's little brother, which meant he'd grown up watching her manipulate situations to her advantage. He loved his sister, but he wasn't stupid. "Eli?" Brett's voice got quieter. "Is everything okay with you and Cass? She's been acting weird lately." "Define weird." "Secretive, and she's been asking me questions about employment law, like what happens if someone gets accused of stealing from their job." "Interesting." What did you tell her? That she should talk to a lawyer if she's worried about something. But Eli, she wouldn't actually steal from her company, would she? I don't know, Brett. A week ago I would have said she'd never steal from her own husband either. There was a long pause. Crap, she really did take your vacation money? $7,000, to help Derek with his apartment deposit. That's really messed up. I'm sorry, man. Not your fault. But Brett, if she asks you any more questions about legal stuff, maybe suggest she talk to Mom and Dad instead of you. Yeah, okay. Good luck with everything. After I hung up, I sat in my garage workshop, surrounded by the familiar chaos of circuit boards and cable assemblies, and planned my next move. If Cassandra and Derek wanted to play hardball, I'd give them a game they'd never forget. The next morning, I drove to Cassandra's office building and had a friendly chat with the security guard. I explained that my wife thought someone had been following her, and I was worried about her safety. Could I possibly get copies of the parking garage footage from the last few weeks? The guard, a retired cop named Martinez, was sympathetic. Domestic situation? Something like that. I can't officially give you anything, but if you happened to be here when I was reviewing footage for my own reports, and you happened to see something interesting, he shrugged. Well, that would be between you and your conscience. 20 minutes later, I had cell phone video of Cassandra meeting Derek in the parking garage on 3 separate occasions, passing him envelopes that were clearly full of cash. The timestamps showed the meetings happened during her work hours, but I wasn't done yet. That afternoon, I created a fake email account and sent an anonymous tip to Cassandra's HR department. You might want to audit your petty cash accounts. I think someone's been taking money for personal use. Then I sat back and waited. The call came at 2:30 p.m. Cassandra, crying and panicked. Eli, they suspended me. HR says someone reported suspicious activity with the company accounts. That's terrible, I said. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. They're doing a full audit. They're looking at everything. Receipts, withdrawals, everything. Well, if you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about. You did this. Her voice turned cold. Somehow, you did this. Cassandra, I'm a computer repair guy. I don't have the power to make your employer audit their books. I know it was you. Prove it. She hung up on me. An hour later, Derek called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Roman, we need to talk. I'm listening. This has gone far enough. Cassandra could lose her job over this. Over what? You know what? The anonymous tip? The audit? Derek, I have no idea what you're talking about. But if Cassandra's in trouble at work, maybe she should focus on that instead of whatever she's been doing with you. Meet me tonight, the old trail behind Miller's Pond. We settle this man to man. I almost laughed. You want to fight me in the woods? What are we, 12? 9 o'clock. Come alone. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone for a long moment, then called Uncle Mick. You busy tonight around 9? I asked. Depends. What do you need? Someone to watch my back while I have a conversation with Derek Lawton. Now you're talking. Where? I told him about the trail. Mick chuckled. Kid's been watching too many movies. Yeah, I'll be there. This should be interesting. At 8:45, Mick and I were positioned along the trail. Mick had brought a thermos of coffee and his old service flashlight, the kind that doubled as a club if necessary. You sure about this? He asked. He called the meeting. I'm just being a good neighbor. Derek showed up right on time, walking down the trail like he owned it. He'd dressed for the occasion, work boots, jeans, flannel shirt, trying to look like a tough guy instead of a real estate agent who spent his days showing houses to suburban families. Roman, he called out when he saw me. You came. You called. What do you want? I want you to back off. Leave Cassandra alone. Stop messing with our lives. Your lives? I stepped closer. Derek, she's still married to me. Legally, she's still my wife. Not for long. Maybe. But until then, her problems are my problems. And right now, her biggest problem is that she's been stealing money from her employer to fund your lifestyle. She didn't steal anything. Really? Because I have security footage of her handing you envelopes full of cash in her office parking garage during work hours. Want to bet that money came from the company petty cash fund? Derek's confident expression wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? Because I'm pretty sure her HR department would be very interested in seeing that footage, especially now that they're doing a full audit. You son of a... Derek swung at me, but I'd been expecting it. I ducked under his punch and stepped back, letting his momentum carry him forward. He stumbled, caught himself, and spun around with his fists up. That's when Uncle Mick stepped out of the shadows with his flashlight beam trained on Derek's face. Evening, Derek, Mick said pleasantly. Nice night for a walk. Derek froze, squinting into the light. This is a private conversation. Is it? Because it sounded like you just tried to assault my nephew. He's been harassing me and Cassandra. Harassing you how? By telling people the truth about your affair? By protecting his own bank account? By existing in the same town where you decided to mess around with his wife? Mick stepped closer, and Derek backed up. For all his bluster, Derek had never been in a real fight in his life. Mick, on the other hand, had spent 3 decades dealing with actual dangerous people. Here's what's going to happen, Mick continued. You're going to walk back to your car. You're going to drive home, and you're going to think real hard about whether this woman is worth destroying your reputation and your business over. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm giving you advice, man to man. Mick smiled, but it wasn't friendly. See, I've been asking around about you, Derek. Turns out you've got a pattern of getting involved with married women. 3 in the last 2 years, according to my sources. Derek went pale. That's not true. Isn't it? Because I've got names and phone numbers. Women who might be very interested to know they weren't as special as you made them feel. I watched Derek's face as he realized the position he was in. His business depended on his reputation. His reputation depended on people trusting him, and trust was a fragile thing in a small town. What do you want? He asked quietly. Leave my nephew alone, Mick said. Leave his wife alone, let her handle her own mess, and maybe think about finding a new town to do business in? Derek looked between us, his jaw working like he wanted to say something else, but whatever fight had been in him was gone. This isn't over, he said finally. Yeah, it is, I told him. You just don't know it yet. Derek turned and walked back up the trail, his footsteps echoing in the darkness. Think he'll listen? I asked Mick. Probably not. Men like Derek don't learn until they've lost everything. Mick unscrewed his thermos and poured coffee into the cap. But we planted some seeds of doubt. Sometimes that's enough. As we walked back to our cars, I felt something shift inside me. For weeks, I'd been reacting to what Cassandra and Derek had done. But now I was starting to think ahead, to plan instead of just respond. The game was changing, and I was finally learning how to play it. The call came from Brett at 7 in the morning, 3 days after my encounter with Derek on the trail. Eli, you need to know something. Cassandra called me last night, crying. She and Derek are planning to leave town today. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. Leave town? Derek's got some job opportunity in Portland, or that's what she said. But Eli, she was asking me about liquidating assets quickly, like how fast can you sell a car, that kind of stuff. They were running. The HR investigation, the social pressure, Derek's reputation problems, it was all too much. They decided to cut their losses and start over somewhere else. Did she say when? This afternoon. She wanted to know if I could help her move some boxes. What did you tell her? That I had to work. But Eli, I think she's planning to clean out whatever accounts she still has access to before she goes. I thanked Brett and hung up, my mind racing. If Cassandra was liquidating assets, she'd have to do it locally. And if Derek was involved, they'd probably meet up to coordinate their escape. I called Jules at the Rookery. It's Eli. I need a favor. What kind of favor? The kind where you accidentally let slip to Derek that I'm planning to be out of town today. Maybe mention that I'm driving to Bangor for a job interview. Jules was quiet for a moment. You want him to think you're not around? Exactly. What are you really planning? To be exactly where they don't expect me to be. Eli, be careful. Desperate people do stupid things. I'm counting on it. I spent the morning making preparations. First, I called Uncle Mick and filled him in. Then I drove to the Millbrook Savings and Loan, where Cassandra and I had our accounts. I had a friendly conversation with the branch manager, a woman named Patricia who'd known us for years. Patricia, I'm worried about some unusual activity on our accounts. Is there a way to flag them for suspicious withdrawals? What kind of activity? My wife's been acting strangely lately. I'm concerned she might try to drain our accounts without my knowledge. Patricia frowned. Eli, if there are marital problems, you should probably speak to a lawyer. I will, but in the meantime, can you put a hold on any large withdrawals that require both signatures? I can flag the accounts for manual review of any transaction over $500. That would be perfect. Next, I drove to the Pine Grove Motel, the only place in town where someone could pay cash and not ask too many questions. The desk clerk, a bored-looking kid with too many piercings, barely looked up when I walked in. I'm looking for my wife, I said. Cassandra Roman. About 5'6", brown hair, probably checked in with a guy named Derek? Can't give out guest information. I slid a 20 across the counter. I'm not asking for information. I'm asking if you've seen them. The 20 disappeared. Room 12. They paid for 3 nights, but said they might leave early. Thanks. I parked across the street and settled in to wait. They showed up at 2:30, driving Derek's BMW, which apparently still smelled like shrimp, based on the way they both grimaced when they got out. They looked nervous, constantly checking over their shoulders as they carried boxes from the car to their room. I gave them an hour to get settled, then made my move. Instead of confronting them directly, I called the front desk from my cell phone. "Hi, this is Detective Morrison from the Millbrook Police," I said, deepening my voice and trying to sound official. "We've had reports of suspicious activity at your motel. Room 12 specifically. We're sending a unit over to investigate." "Suspicious activity?" "Possible fraud investigation. We'll be there in 10 minutes. I hung up and watched the motel office. Within 5 minutes, the desk clerk was walking toward room 12. The reaction was immediate. Derek burst out of the room, looked around frantically, then started throwing boxes back into his car. Cassandra appeared a moment later, her face pale with panic. That's when I got out of my car and walked across the street. "Going somewhere?" They both spun around. Derek's face went through several expressions before settling on anger. Cassandra just looked defeated. "Eli," she said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "Saying goodbye, I guess. Though I have to ask, were you planning to tell me you were leaving town? Or was I supposed to figure it out when the divorce papers showed up?" "We were going to call you," Derek said. "Were you, from Portland, after you'd liquidated whatever assets you could get your hands on?" Cassandra's face crumpled. "How did you know about your plans? Cassandra, this is Millbrook. Everyone knows everything." I gestured around the motel parking lot. "Did you really think you could sneak out of town without anyone noticing?" "We're not sneaking anywhere," Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I got a job opportunity in Portland." "Really? What company?" Derek's mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. "That's what I thought." I looked at Cassandra. "So what's the real plan? Take whatever money you can grab and start over somewhere else?" "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" She looked at Derek, then back at me. "Everything's falling apart, Eli. I'm probably going to lose my job. People in town won't even look at me, and Derek's business is tanking because people don't trust him anymore," I finished. "Yeah, I heard. So we thought maybe a fresh start. With my money. It's not your money, it's our money. Was our money, past tense." I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. "I moved everything to individual accounts yesterday, accounts you don't have access to." The color drained from her face. "You can't do that." "I already did. I also put fraud alerts on all our credit cards and closed the joint checking account." I looked at Derek. "Hope you've got enough gas money to get to Portland." Derek stepped forward, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you're so smart." "Smarter than you, apparently. Smart enough not to get involved with someone else's wife. Smart enough not to steal money from my employer. Smart enough not to threaten people in front of witnesses." "What witnesses?" I gestured toward the motel office, where the desk clerk was standing in the doorway with his phone out, obviously recording. Then I pointed across the street, where Uncle Mick was leaning against his truck with his arms crossed. "Smile, Derek. You're on camera." Derek looked around, finally realizing how exposed he was. A public parking lot, multiple witnesses, his car packed with boxes like he was fleeing a crime scene. "This is harassment," he said weakly. "No, this is consequences." I turned back to Cassandra. "You want to leave town? Fine, leave. But you leave with what you brought to this marriage, not what you stole from it." "I never stole anything from you." "Really? The vacation fund wasn't stealing? The company petty cash wasn't stealing? What would you call it?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to get in that car and drive away. You're going to start your new life in Portland or wherever, but you're going to do it honestly, with your own money and your own effort. And if we don't?" I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then you get to explain to the police why you're fleeing town right after being suspended for embezzlement. You get to explain to Derek's real estate clients why their agent is running away in the middle of several transactions. And you get to explain to your parents why their daughter became the kind of person who steals from her husband and her employer." Cassandra started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative kind she'd used before. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said. "But it did go this far, and now you have to live with it." Derek put his arm around her shoulders, but she shrugged him off. "This is all your fault," she told him. "If you hadn't pushed me to take the money." "I didn't push you to do anything," Derek snapped back. "You offered." And just like that, they turned on each other. Right there in the motel parking lot with an audience, they started airing all their grievances and betrayals. I listened for a few minutes, then walked back to my car. Uncle Mick met me halfway. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I think I am." Behind us, Cassandra and Derek were still arguing, their voices getting louder and more desperate. Other motel guests had come out to watch the show. Think they'll actually leave town? Eventually, but probably not together. I looked back at the scene one more time. Turns out there really isn't honor among thieves. What are you going to do now? I thought about it. The house would be quiet without Cassandra, but it would also be peaceful. I could focus on my work, maybe expand the electronics repair business. I could take that trip to Ireland, alone this time, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. "I'm going to go home," I said, "and I'm going to start over." As we drove away, I could see Derek and Cassandra in my rearview mirror, still arguing in the parking lot. Two people who'd destroyed their lives for a few $1,000s and the illusion of easy happiness. I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. Revenge isn't about hurting people. It's about making sure actions have consequences. It's about refusing to be a victim. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply stepping aside and letting people destroy themselves. The road ahead was clear, and for the first time in months, so was my future.